Hang on. Recording.
Hey, everybody.
All right, so recording is in progress and we'll get this whole thing started here in a second. Just wanted to get on the record before we do our recording. And now I'm going to do a screen share. There is a Lisa. Hello, Lisa. Okay, stay tuned for screen share. Sarah, go ahead and kick it off.
Great. So the way I'm going to do this is we'll go through sort of just the basics, the nuts and bolts of a title commitment, and the deed is going to be wrapped up in there. And so any questions that you guys have at the end, we can go over.
Just real quick, audio check. How's everybody? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear Sarah?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Gonna do. Kyle's here in person. Hi, Kyle. Excellent.
All right. Are we screen shared?
We are sharing. Fire away.
Great. So starting with the basics, I mean, what is title insurance? I'm just going to go through this briefly, but it's basically policy coverage that protects a property owner or lender against financial loss due to defects or issues related to the title. So to put it simply, title insurance gives owners and lenders peace of mind knowing that there's no other person that has ownership of or interest in their property. For lenders, they have the assurance that there are no other liens that take priority over their mortgage. And a couple times today, I'll probably say, kind of put yourself in the lender's shoes and think of it as when it comes to foreclosure, a lender is going to want to make sure that they are able to foreclose on their collateral and keep their investment safe. And title, of course, is different in a few basic ways. In one sense, the premium is only paid one time, whereas other types of insurance, you're paying it continually, whether it's annually or monthly. Title insurance premiums don't typically vary from company to company. They're regulated by the state Department of Insurance. And then, whereas other types of insurance cover for future losses, title insurance is covering for protection against prior events. And then just basically a good title company should be working hand in hand with you to address any problems in a timely manner. Understand the basics of title can be a good tool for agents. And I'm going to go through the title commitment and show you some red flags and things you can keep an eye out for. So when it comes to reviewing the title commitment, can everybody see this?
Sorry, trying to keep up. Here we go.
Schedule A is basically going to be like your declarations page. So it's going to
What's a
tell you-
declarations page?
Good question.
I love questions. Basically, it's just a rundown of what's being insured. So it's going to give you the name of the person getting the policy. If you do have a lender, it's going to show the lender that is being insured for the amounts for the owner's coverage, which would be your purchase price. And then your lender's coverage is going to be up to the amount of the loan. And then it tells you, like number one shows you the commitment date. That's how far the records were in the county. So if you are
Just the camera's off right now, so you don't need to talk to it, just me. No,
Me too.
and Kyle.
Okay. Anyhow, so that's gonna tell you how up to date your policy is, or your title commitment is rather. As far as what date the records were good through in the county. And. Oh, one important thing it's gonna show here is how title is currently held. So on number 4 there, you're gonna see that our deed is Sally Sellers, our seller in this transaction. And she got this house in February of 2000. So that gives you a little bit of a hint as to how long they've owned it. This is handy, of course, especially when you're looking at situations like there might be an estate or anything where you're gonna need to know who the record owner is versus who might be signing your contract.
So you know to look for anything special, like you would need a POA or you would need a short certificate or
Potentially.
something along those lines.
Yeah.
Who's gonna-
Or if your seller, you're doing a listing and your seller says, no, it's just me, I own this house free and clear, and then you look at your commitment and she's on there with 3 siblings, so.
So you're gonna need a couple death certificates
you
or
might
something
need
like
some
that.
more information, yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah.
So you know to follow the breadcrumbs at that point.
Exactly. All right, so the legal description is gonna be what's next in the commitment. And it's gonna show you not only the area of the property, but you can also look to this to see any type of red flags. And this is where I'm mentioning that I'm gonna discuss the deed along with the title commitment. This is part that really comes into play. Because the legal description is going to show exactly what the deed says as far as what the area is. And it should also show if there are certain types of recorded easements, rights of way, that type of thing. So if you're seeing that, at the end of the legal description, it's showing a recorded right of way, it might be something that comes into play during your contract. Not necessarily everything is gonna show though, and that's where the next couple schedules come into play.
So this is a very fun legal description that you have up here. Did you put that up there intentionally because of all the number salad and kind of what the heck am I looking at of it?
I did not. This one is, it's just coincidence, but this one is just showing, I think it's a condo. So because a condo, you don't really own any of the land around you. It's just giving references to all kinds of deed and book and page and instrument numbers and that sort of thing. So no, just purely coincidence.
Do you have any further exhibits of deeds in there? Like, part of the fun stuff when we're looking at a deed is
150 feet to a rock.
the line calls,
Mhm.
right? 150 feet at 76 degrees, this many minutes and seconds to a rock, and then to a pin formerly in the middle of the creek
To a weeping willow.
to a weeping willow.
The tree ones are my favorite.
The tree
Yeah.
ones are my favorite too.
So,
No, I was counting on you to bring the humor, so.
all
I
right,
did
so
not.
so those meets and bounds is what they call those.
Mhm.
Those meets and bounds are kind of I won't say unique, but more prevalent in the Northeast in the older part of our country. Because well, I guess down south, but you've all heard of the Mason-Dixon line. And the Mason-Dixon line was a line set by 2 surveyors, Mason and Dixon, to set a baseline as a line of latitude so that the remainder of the United States could be set out into townships and ranges, so that it was much easier, so that you could just say you are in this county, in this section, in this subsection, and the squares were already predetermined, rather than to the willow tree, to the stump, to the pile of rocks.
Creek, yeah.
So that's that's what we're talking about. And whenever you're dealing with acres, you might also be dealing with perches. which is another measure of area, or rods, or chains, or lengths, which are also measures of distance, the same as a mile, a league, a foot, or an inch. So you can start at the starting point, following the cardinal direction of the compass by that distance, and theoretically, everything should go back to the point of beginning.
Theoretically.
And do you talk about closing of a deed, or whether the description closes?
I mean,
Theoretically, it should.
does everybody really want to know about all of those intricacies?
No, but when we're looking at a deed and we say, what the hell am I looking at? That's what we're looking at,
Yeah.
is it's so that a person with no knowledge of that land could theoretically walk the boundaries of it if they had a compass and a measuring device to come out to know exactly what is being purchased or sold. So that's the fun part on a deed.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, with Pennsylvania not being a survey state, meaning it's not required, I mean, if you think about a house in Carlisle Borough and you're looking at a legal description and it's telling you walk 150 feet north, anybody can, pretty much walk 150 feet north and then walk 300 feet.
Depends on if you're doing true north versus.
East.
Right, and stop before you get to the middle of High Street, because you'll be run over.
Yeah, when you get to some places out in the country or something and you're dealing with 50 calls on one deed, then it becomes a matter of if there's really concern about the boundary.
Yeah.
then that's when you call in a professional.
So I have sidetracked you enough. Onward.
That is okay. All right. So there are two more schedules left on your title commitment, and this is where it's gonna really start getting a lot of getting to an area where it gives you a lot of information that you'll want to know. So requirements is Schedule B1, and basically you can think of it as these requirements must be met in order for the title company to be able to close and insure and issue a policy on the property.
So if I were a title person talking to you as another title person, our lingo would be, what the hell's wrong with the Schedule A, or what's up with the Schedule B1? Like those are the lingo that you use, like Schedule A and Schedule B1, or
Probably more so comparatively, because we, just as lingo, it would be more specific things that we would be talking about.
okay,
So.
but everybody in the industry would know.
Yes, that a B1 is requirements and B2 is exceptions.
Okay,
So basically for B1, it is all of these requirements have to be met. For B2, it is here's what we're not going to cover in the policy.
okay,
So on B1 is where you're gonna find, again, mention of your upcoming mortgage and deed that will be recorded. And it's gonna go through all of the basic requirements, which is, you gotta pay the premiums, you need to, make sure that everybody's verified their identity, that anybody having any type of ownership needs to be signing off. So those are pretty standard, and then it will be showing you some more specific things, such as the tax information broadly, not a specific tax certification, but tax information broadly, assessment information, if you ever needed to look at that kind of thing. But then toward the end of Schedule B1, that's where you're gonna see a list of the things that need to be specifically met in order to be able to insure. So you're gonna find your mortgages, if there are any judgments, if there's any situations like child support liens, divorces, bankruptcy. Well, in the case of bankruptcy, it's not necessarily gonna show on your title report, but if there is one filed, it should show on there if there's one active.
so a divorce, if it's been filed, if there was a
Yeah.
divorce decree recorded,
Yeah, if it's been recorded, not necessarily.
but so a
Exactly.
handshake deal's not gonna show up.
A handshake deal is not gonna show up. Nope.
Okay,
It's basically just going to tell you what's been recorded in the county and what's currently showing. So on this one, I have an example of the mortgage. This can be handy, I think, for agents, because if your seller has given you certain information and then you're looking and seeing an additional, possibly a line of credit or, you know, another second lien that they haven't disclosed to you, that could obviously be a big game changer. And also if there are judgments, there are potentially judgments that are gonna need to be paid. And, for Sally's seller, Sally's having a hard time. She's got some judgments and she's going through a divorce, so you can see, an example of what would show up if there was something on your, seller's title deed. Any questions on that?
So we would know with the distribution of this report, if more money is owed that can be satisfied with the sale of this property.
Potentially, and again, there are always things that come out of the blue that, you know, might even be filed during the course of the contract time. So back on page 1, where we saw the commitment date I mentioned, if the county records were good through the 10th of the month, and then the seller had another judgment filed, say on the 15th of the month, then that should show at what's called a bring down prior to closing. So the title company will just do a last check to make sure that there's nothing new filed. But it's not terribly uncommon, unfortunately, to find things filed that closely to closing.
And just a caveat regarding the mortgage, that's going to show the original amount of that loan, not the ending amount of the loan. So it might be lower, or is hopefully lower than the original amount. But in the case of certain adjustments or modifications due to the HARP or Home Affordable program, or delinquencies, that balance could be higher. And there may be multiple mortgages show up here, some that didn't even belong to the current owner, if that satisfaction hadn't been filed at the courthouse. And how many times have we had to close those out?
More than I can count.
Right. So somebody may have paid off their mortgage, received the satisfaction from the bank back in the old days, had a mortgage burning party, and that was the last they thought of it until it became an estate. And this is why it's a good idea to do the title search probably closer to the beginning of the process than the day before the end.
Yeah.
So that's why we try to be proactive.
Yeah, and for us, we're ordering title searches as soon as we receive those contracts. So as soon as we get the contract from an agent, we're starting the searches on the county records for maybe bankruptcy, child support, name searches to make sure that identities, and we're avoiding fraud, that we're verifying identities. And I think that's all of the basic.
And that's to keep us in compliance with the contract as well, because our standard agreement of sale stipulates that with the standard, I mean, without modifying that blank, it stipulates that we're going to be ordering our title within 7 days of
yes.
execution of the agreement. So if you get that signed on a Monday and you send this over to Titan on Tuesday, that's going to be ordered Tuesday or Wednesday. So we're well within keeping you on the right side of the agreement.
Yeah, yeah. So ideally, things are gonna show up on your requirements, but every now and then you will get contacted by a title company saying that there's an additional requirement that's come up during the course of the transaction. And like I said, this happens because title companies are updating as the process goes along. And depending on what you might find during the process, that could, of course, revise the requirements. But typically, a title company should be adding the new requirements and then redistributing the title commitment if something like that was to happen.
Okay.
Okay, so Schedule B2 is exceptions, so basically these are gonna be items that title insurance will not cover. This is gonna be a really good place for you to take a look and see what sort of specific items might be showing up as far as easements, rights of way, any sort of access to the property, all types of other things, because if it is recorded, it should show on Schedule B2. Let me see if I have a. So well, one example is for condos and planned unit developments. So if you do have a condo or you do have a PUD that's recorded, that's going to show on your exception. Also, if there's issues with private access, anything like that, or if there's a shared driveway, ideally, there's already been a prior owner that has handled getting the agreement between, neighbors and landowners, that there's already been something recorded in the county. If you're not seeing it on the exceptions, then that most likely means that it's not recorded. So if you know that you have a house with, say, a shared driveway, then you're not seeing it recorded on exceptions. That might be something that you want to be proactively addressing, since lenders especially are going to want to see things like that. So having a look at the exceptions page, Schedule B2 is an important way of seeing what could potentially become an issue.
A note on that, and if you see, for instance, in the seller's property disclosure that there is some sort of right of way, private access, easement, etc., and you do as I urge you to do, which is follow the breadcrumbs as far as you can, to make sure that you have the whole picture and protect everyone. And you elect the contingency for deeds, restrictions, or zoning. If you're looking at deeds and restrictions, this is where you're going to be looking. You're going to be talking to Sarah about, hey, can you fast track this title search? I really want to get a look at the Schedule B2 to see what our exceptions are. And that's going to give you the actual physical description that comes out of the deed to tell us about what that private access or right of way looks like on paper and what your client's going to be obliged to uphold after they're the owner. So that's how we satisfy that contingency. Zoning is going to be totally separate. You're going to be going through township personnel or something along those lines. But this is how we protect our client to make sure that they get their eyes on this and are able to acknowledge it and say, yeah, that's what I expected. That works for me. Or, oh my gosh, I didn't know that there was an access basically running next to my house that another property owner could be using in the future.
Mm-hmm. Until you have somebody just walking across your yard one day.
Yeah.
And one thing that's important to remember is that the deed, when you're looking at it, should show you anything that's currently affecting the property, such as a shared, driveway, if it's on record. But it's not necessarily going to show on the deed. So that's where taking a look at the title commitment and at Schedule B2, the exceptions, that's where you're going to see the full report of the property, because your title company is going to go back, depending on what kind of transaction it is, at least 60 years, sometimes closer to 100.
And often we'll pull a deed and look at it, and it doesn't reflect an easement that was recorded separately after the purchase of that
Exactly.
property. And that's going to be a standalone document that a title searcher is going to track down that you might not necessarily be able to find with your level of skill or experience.
Yeah, exactly. One little tip is that if you see a book and page or an instrument number on your title commitment, then that means you can get a copy of it. So contact your title company if you need any copies of anything, or you want to take a look at the items that might be impacting your property specifically.
Everybody following along so far? Let me know if you're asleep.
Title. So, I mean, I love title.
I think it's riveting, Sarah. Don't get a complex.
I don't. So, on this set of, exceptions, we have our general things that title is not going to cover. But then we're getting a little bit more specific. For example, this one has a condo rights and bylaws. So you can see here that there are several instruments listed. And so, if you're seeing instruments again, that means that you should be able to get a copy of it, review it further.
Now, descriptions of an easement, they're probably gonna appear as an exhibit or an attachment to this report.
It would not be, you mean a copy of it automatically?
Like, if there's an easement or something, is that usually, come
Also
up-
distributed?
also distributed?
Not typically, because your average title search package is gonna be 150 to 200 pages. So the commitment is condensing that information for you.
Mm.
So typically, I mean, I don't know if other title companies would, I doubt it. But you should be able to request it from your title company and get a copy.
Cool.
Yeah. So one little thing on this one is easements of a party wall, and all that means is there's a shared wall. You'll see that type of thing, especially in row homes and in condominiums.
So you said that there will be, it'll say if there's an easement on this commitment.
It should, yeah. Sometimes, well, there are sometimes situations where neighbors have a handshake deal going, like that type of thing. What was that?
It just shows whatever was originally put on the deed, not
Yeah.
any type of implied easements or anything like that.
So if you have a situation where you know there's something that should be impacting the property, or there should be some type of right-of-way agreement, if you're not seeing it on your commitment, then that's probably a sign to do a little bit more digging, yeah. So I have some, and actually, we don't have to look through this.
The reasons why?
Do you want to go over that?
Yeah.
Okay, so just title in general, a lot of people wonder why their buyers even need title insurance. I mean, even as a title insurance agent myself, I absolutely knowing as much as I do about records and everything else, I would never myself go and buy a house without getting a policy on it. But there are a lot of people that don't understand why title is needed if a proper search is done. And my opinion is it's covering, not just what you're seeing on record, but what's not on record. So one of the bigger things is unknown heirs. If there ever was, especially in the last couple of owners, if you have an estate, and you have an heir for the deceased person that wasn't known at the time of closing, coming back later on and making claim to the estate, this type of situation is enough for me to feel like I want to be covered. And you're protecting your biggest investment. And I mean, that's basically a title insurance commitment.
That's brilliant. Okay. So some of our largest issues, not saying most common, but most dangerous, most expensive to correct are gonna arise out of title commitment, in my mind, right?
Oh, yeah, it doesn't happen as often, but when it does, it's usually pretty big. Yeah.
It's the same for me as whenever I characterize the difference between residential real estate and commercial. Commercial might have fewer moving parts, but they all weigh 20 tons and they're going to crush you to a pulp.
Mhm.
Same thing with title issues. They happen less frequently than a dispute over a refrigerator, but a problem for a refrigerator can usually be fixed for, a couple $100. A title issue that isn't properly handled is really going to put everybody into a tailspin. We're dealing with one right now. That's going to have a lawsuit, and we're not talking hundreds of dollars. We're talking many many thousands of dollars.
Um. Yeah.
So we don't want to hear bad news from you.
Well, no, we do. The things that show up in the, can be generally corrected. Things we're talking about can be corrected. They just take a little bit of time because a lot of times what we're talking about are things that'll require satisfactions to be recorded at the courthouse. They're going to require court action in some cases to do a quick claim. They may require us to contact somebody who has a right of way across a particular property to have that right of way vacated if possible, or
So is that the issues you want coming up if you're on a deadline, on a timeline?
no. And that's why we want to use a title company who's on the ball, and we want to try and get these things done as quickly as possible so that we're dealing with these things early on rather than the day before closing, right? Because it's not going to be able to get fixed. If you find out about it on day 7 after the contract's written and you still have 40 days to go before closing, you've got a chance. But if we find out on day 37, then we're going to be extending. Now we're running into multiple extensions, costs for rate locks, rent backs, all kinds of train wrecks. These are not the things that we can snap our fingers and make go away. And that's why the contract changed several years ago to make sure that we had the title application filed within 7 days, because that didn't used to exist in the contract. Yeah.
So just a couple of thoughts with that in mind. You probably hear when you're sitting at a closing table, you're probably hearing your title person go through documents. And I try to do it in a thoughtful way, but all the way up until the end of the transaction, of course, at closing, you're finding out if there's anything else that you did not remember to tell me before now. So all the way up until then, it is possible that you can find out about more things. But yeah, definitely the sooner the better.
Absolutely.
And then another thought was just to be aware of what title is not seeing. When it comes to things like zoning and certain more township specific type of things, the title report is not necessarily going to show you that type of thing.
Absolutely
So
not.
I had heard it talked about earlier this week, just, going to zoning officers, going to township. So the title commitment is limited in what they're seeing.
Those are separate issues.
Searches of township, yes, searches of township offices is not typical. It's only if the township itself has filed something with the county that you're really going to see it on a title commitment.
Sounds good. Question from our home audience. Is it customary for the list agent and buyer's agent to receive a copy of the title commitment?
Yes.
That's going to go directly to the...
We send it to the parties, so we're sending it to buyer, seller, lender, and both agents.
Okay.
And if there's an attorney on the deal, if it's an estate or something like that, then the commitment should be going to the attorney as well.
Is that an industry standard or just something we do?
I think, well, that's kind of a hard question to answer. It should be an industry standard. I
We-
think
I
that-
don't think it is, though.
Yeah,
No.
we think it's a good idea to have everyone informed, and that's why it goes out, right?
Yeah.
April says, so if we don't have one in 7 to 10 days, we should ask. I think it's a good practice. I think it's a good practice for all of us to be mindful of the dates in our contract. And as a list agent, we should be following up about a week into it and checking in with the buyer side and say, did you file or did you make application for title insurance? Because sometimes they want to wait until after the inspections are complete and all that stuff. And by that time, we're really kicking the can down the road. If we wait 10 days and then we wait another, it slips our mind and we forget to do that. We're waiting for the appraisal now. And you know, we're trying to get this rushed through at the last minute. So check on that, make sure it's done.
One thing I would like to mention too, when it comes to the area, of course, we're not gonna be able to, in most situations, have a perfect description that makes it easy or simple for every lay person to walk out and be able to walk the property and know exactly what it is without having a survey. But it is a good idea to keep an eye on that, especially if you have a situation where you know that there might be multiple parcels, that there might be an empty lot next door that's getting sold along with it. Title companies don't always see, and I think most don't see, information that would only be known if you were to see the property in person. So keeping in mind that your title company is not out there with, you know, even sometimes the insurance companies, I guess, but the title company is not seeing it in person. So it's okay to double check them, ask them questions to make sure that they are including all of the pertinent information. But that's just kind of a trend that I've seen recently. That's a good thing to have a heads up about.
Another reminder to make sure that your contract is complete, because that is, you know, that's the thing that follows through to all parties in the transaction. Title company sees that, and that's how they're knowing what property to pull a title report on, because of the tax ID number, the address that's on that contract. The address might not encompass the back lot.
Exactly.
It may not take into account the lot next door that doesn't have a mailing address with the county or township. So if we are selling multiple parcels, get that on there.
Yep. Anybody have any questions?
Any other questions from home? Okie dokie. Well, I'm gonna make sure this recording gets with the slide deck, and we're gonna email this out to everybody so that they have some resources to go back on. Sarah, we're gonna distribute this on YouTube. We're gonna send out all kinds of stuff just so everybody can get to know us. I'm kidding. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to deepen your professionalism and get to know what's going on. Have a great day. If you have more questions, feel free to call Sarah, and talk to you later. Bye now.